Ketter.
Thank you very much, Mr Acting Deputy President. And I am proud to have been elected as the Secretary of Labor's Fair Work Taskforce. This is a group of Labor senators and members of Federal Parliament who are very concerned about the government's attempt to rewrite our industrial relations system and its recent reference to the Productivity Commission of the architecture of our workplace relations system and our Fair Work Act. And we know that the Productivity Commission has issued a draft report, and a couple of the key features of that report are a recommendation to cut penalty rates, and also the introduction of a new form of individual contract referred to as the enterprise contract. So the Fair Work Taskforce, of which I am Secretary, has the job of responding to that, and we are concerned about the fact that this government seems to have an ideological fixation with our industrial relations system, irrespective of the human cost that is associated with the changes they're proposing to introduce. Now, the Fair Work Taskforce was launched in June and has already conducted hearings in Tasmania and in Victoria. And last week, Mr Acting Deputy President, was the turn of my home state, Queensland, to host the Fair Work Taskforce. And we visited Brisbane, spoke to a number of workers and their representatives there and other interested parties. And in addition, we took the opportunity to visit Townsville and Rockhampton to hear directly from workers in those areas. Labor established the Fair Work Taskforce because we believe that everyone, not just a select few, should have a say about the impact of the government's policies on jobs, families and communities, as well as the important workplace entitlements such as penalty rates and the minimum wage. In the course of my contribution this afternoon, Mr Acting Deputy President, I also want to touch on some of the concerns I have about the treatment of 306 workers employed by BHP Billiton Mitsubishi Alliance at their Blackwater mine in central Queensland, and in particular their decision there to outsource the work of those 306 workers. But Mr Acting Deputy President, I note that this week has been a week of milestones. Monday we marked the second anniversary of the election of the coalition government, but yesterday was Labor Day in America. And being a former union secretary myself and having been involved in fighting for the rights of workers young and old, I can relate to this particular quote from an American Senator, Elizabeth Warren, who said, "Unions were on the front lines in the fights for the minimum wage, for social security, for Medicare and for the Voting Rights Act. Corporations and billionaires already have a powerful voice in this country. Unions made sure working people had a strong voice too." So sometimes, Mr Acting Deputy President, it's on the unions that are the voice for working people and working families. And as Secretary of Labor's Fair Work Taskforce, I can say that under this government, workers know that they cannot take even their basic rights for granted. What was increasingly common from the workers that we heard from was that if they lose their penalty rates, the kids' sport and the birthday presents will have to go. It's important to remember that the Sunday penalty rate is the reason why a lot of these low-paid workers can make ends meet. These workers rely on penalty rates to compensate them for missing crucial family time. Cutting penalty rates has a broader implication. It has bigger impacts on the local economy as a whole. And we heard from worker after worker that if their penalty rates go, they are worried about paying for basics like the mortgage and electricity. These are workers who are on or just above the minimum wage or on the award wage. They're not spending their hard-earned cash, Madam Acting Deputy President, on luxury items, and the decisions that they face and the battles that they are on are not based on the vintage of wine that they can crack open that night or whether the brie is soft enough. No, it's about rent, it's about food on the table and whether they can let their kids go on the school excursion. They say there won't be enough money for kids' sport or for the birthday presents if this callous government has its way. Now, we know that we shouldn't be surprised by this because this is a government that condones the sacking of workers by text message, and we know that this is a government that has abolished the Commonwealth Cleaning Services guidelines, which has led to substantial wage cuts for the cleaners that clean our offices here. As I mentioned, Monday was the second anniversary of the election and a day when the Australian people went to the ballot box faced with a disingenuous promise from the Prime Minister that he would protect workers' pay and conditions, and we've seen that that is far from the truth. The Productivity Commission inquiry into Australia's workplace relations system, which was ordered by this government, focuses specifically on Australia's workers' penalty rates. The Productivity Commission draft report is the ammunition Tony Abbott, or the Prime Minister, needs for Work Choices 2.0. The Commission's interim report proposed a two-tiered penalty rate system which would cut the penalty rates of every worker in the hospitality, retail and entertainment sectors of our economy by up to 37% on Sundays. So the question has to be asked why this government does not think that workers in the hospitality and retail industry don't deserve penalty rates. Madam Acting Deputy President, these are industries which are the lowest paid in our country, and these are the industries that the Productivity Commission has singled out for a pay cut. But Madam Acting Deputy President, the Fair Work Taskforce has been out there talking to workers and their representatives, and I must say I have been in awe of the stories that we've heard and the people who are out there trying to raise a family on very low rates of pay. And yet these are the people who are in the firing line to have their weekly income affected by changes to legislation. I was particularly struck by a young father in Rockhampton, James from Big W, who said that normal people can't afford life without penalty rates. We heard also from Robin, a grandmother and employee of Woolworths in Rockhampton, who said, "I like to spoil my grandchildren and give them things their parents can't afford. Those things would have to go if penalty rates were cut." And in Brisbane we heard from Rebecca, a mother from working in a Coles store, who said that if I lose my penalty rates, I lose the ability to pay for my daughter's ballet. The Fair Work Taskforce has heard a number of different submissions from various unions as well, and I want to mention the Australasian Meat Industry Employees Union, who talked about the presence of labour hire companies in the meat industry and how this threatens the conditions and entitlements of those workers in the industry. So I also indicate I do want to touch on the concern I have with the treatment of a number of workers at the Blackwater mine, and I'm very concerned that this has happened under the Abbott government, that we are seeing a casualisation of this particular industry. The jobs have been announced that they're going to be outsourced without any consultation taking place between the relevant union and the company. This was announced by the company prior to consultations occurring. Madam Acting Deputy President, I've had the opportunity to talk to a worker from the Blackwater mine. This person is a worker who's everyday worker, has a family. He told me that there's real concern in the local community about the flow-on implications of this outsourcing of the work to a labour hire company, and it has the effect on local schools, on the businesses in the community. They even talked about the fact that they might lose their fire brigade because the volunteers there are workers from that mine whose future is now very uncertain. So, Madam Acting Deputy President, I'm concerned about this. I believe that this is a company that's not doing the right thing, and I'm concerned about the implications for the local community there in Blackwater. So, in conclusion, Madam Acting Deputy President, on the issue of industrial relations, this is a government that will take our country down the low-wage road, whereas Labor wants to look to the future.